Well, sliced bread first appeared in 1928, believe it or not. Otto Rohwedder invented the first loaf slicing machine, and it was a huge hit right away. Bakers all across the country bought these machines and started making sliced bread. And everybody loved it. But sliced bread was banned by the federal government during World War II. You know, the federal government always looking out for our best interest. Here's why they banned it. Sliced bread required thicker plastic because once the bread was sliced, it would dry out quicker, so they had to make thicker plastic, but they needed plastic for the war effort, so they banned sliced bread. But the hue and cry across the country was so great, after only 2 months, they had to revoke the ban. In fact, there was this one lady, she wrote a letter to the New York Times, and it was read by people all across the country. This one lady charted how much extra time it cost her because she was married and had 4 kids, and she made sandwiches for them and had to make toast every morning, and she started calculating how much extra time it took her. She counted it up for the day, and then for each week, and then for the month, and over a year, how much time sliced bread saved her. And it persuaded so many people, the federal government revoked the ban after only 2 months. Yeah, sliced bread, it's become kind of the benchmark, hasn't it? We say it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. Something so simple. Well, 100 years later, the History Channel decided to do a program on the 100 best gadgets of all times. And they listed all 100 of them in this 1-hour program. Here's the top 10. See if you can guess the top 10 best gadgets of all time. Number 10, the light bulb. You think about it, pretty cool, because now you get more production from the night hours, right? Yeah, okay. Number 9, the alarm clock. Record player, telephone, the air conditioner. Yeah, amen. I read a book once, and a whole chapter on air conditioning and how much more productive the United States became with the invention of the air conditioner. Because now you have whole areas of the country that can be settled because people can live there and be productive during the summer months. It's just amazing, these innovations. The personal computer, the syringe. How many lives has the syringe saved? Pretty amazing. Here's the top 3. See if you can guess them. The television. Number 3. Number 2, the radio. And what's number 1? What's the smartphone? The smartphone, yeah. A main driver of invention and innovation is the desire to make things easier and faster. And I think most appliances do that, don't they? Think about the appliances in your house. How much of laundry, how much time do we save because of washing machines and dryers instead of a rock and a stream? Think of all the time that saves. Cooking, appliances for cooking. It's sped it up. It's made it so much easier for us. Cleaning as well, just cleaning around the house. How much less effort we have to invest because of these appliances that we have for cleaning. It saves us many hours. The personal computer and the smartphone, they've saved us a tremendous amount of time. But now, what do we do with all the time that we save using personal computers and smartphones? What do we do with that time? We spend that time on the computer and the smartphone. We spend it on social media, we spend it texting, we spend it playing games. Despite all of the technology originally meant to save us time and effort, studies have revealed that people feel more stressed now than ever. Did you know that 3 out of 4 doctor visits are due to stress-related problems? And we spend over $300 billion a year in dealing with stress-related problems. Let's do our own poll. Show of hands. How many of you are tired, pressed, stressed? Raise your hand. If you're, a number of us are. Weary. We may not be physically weary, but man, in our soul, man, I'm just tired, just weary. Well, I have good news. there's rest for the weary. Look at verse 28. Jesus says, "Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Jump back to chapter 9 and look at verse 35. Chapter 9, verse 35. Then Jesus went about all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues, preaching the gospel of the kingdom, and healing every sickness and every disease among the people. But when he saw the multitudes, he was moved with compassion for them, because they were weary and scattered, like sheep having no shepherd. As Jesus looked out over that crowd that had gathered to hear him and to be touched by him, there was compassion for how needy they were. It moved him. That word moved there refers to deeply affected. Jesus didn't just, "Oh yeah, that's too bad." He was profoundly moved. The idea is, you've heard the terms bowels of compassion. It's that phrase comes from the sense of you feel it physically. You're so deeply moved, you feel it physically, and that's the word that's used here. Jesus was moved with compassion. He served them not just to show his power, but because they were in need and he had something to do about it. He wasn't bothered with these people. He wasn't annoyed that they wanted something from him. Think about Jesus. Hour after hour, day after day, people are coming to him wanting something from him. They came to hear him because people were saying, "Have you heard this man? His words are amazing." But beyond that, he has the power to heal. We just read, he was healing every disease, every illness that came. He was giving out help to people who were desperately needy to hear a word of hope and to touch that would heal them of their physical afflictions. They came for healing, but they got more. They got him. When Jesus healed the infirm, it wasn't the stage show that we see with the televangelists today, where people line up and they come forward and they get knocked over. When Jesus healed people, it wasn't, bam, next. Can you imagine, just picture Jesus as people are coming. Tell me, what is your need? And they share their need. And you can be certain that Jesus wasn't looking over their shoulder at how long the line was. He wasn't thinking, when's this going to be over? I need a burger. Every person that came was the person that Jesus was dealing with, was looking into their eyes and listening to them beyond their words about their physical need to what might be needed inwardly. He didn't just minister to their body, he ministered to their soul. Think about this. Lepers came to Jesus. Lepers were unclean. No one would touch them. And yet we read in the Gospels that Jesus touched the lepers. Probably not the leopards, the lepers. Do you realize what a healing that was for their heart, for their soul? This man is willing to go beyond convention and to not only take care of me physically, but to take care of me spiritually. He was filled with compassion. I don't know what your ideas about God are, but please hear me. God is like Jesus. Jesus said, "He who has seen me, heard me, has seen and heard the Father." I don't know what your idea about God is, but please hear me. Our God is a God of compassion. And there's something else that we find here in chapter 9. It says that Jesus, he was moved with compassion when he saw the people, that they were like sheep without a shepherd. Jesus was concerned about these people, not only for what their physical and spiritual needs were, but the fact that they didn't have good leaders. Their leaders were corrupt. These people were pressed. And he was concerned about who was leading them, the quality of those that they were looking to lead them in life. Satan is a master a deceitful propaganda. He fills the world with misery and woe, and then he blames God for it, and millions of people are fooled. They blame God when a loved one dies or disaster strikes, and yet sorrow and death are the result of sin that Satan engineers. Jesus came to end sin and the sorrow that it brings because our God is a God who is full of compassion. Here in chapter 11, as Jesus looks out over the crowd, he sees people whose lives are a grueling grind. They are overworked, they are heavily taxed, they are poorly led by corrupt, selfish rulers. No, I'm not talking about California in 2024. I'm talking about the first century Galilee. In a word, these people are weary to the bone, and it's made worse by their utter lack of hope. There was little prospect that things were going to get any better. That's why they yearned for the Messiah. Well, here he is. And as he looks out over this mass of the weary, his heart yearns with compassion for them. And so he says, "Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." It's a classic if-then condition. If we come to Jesus, then he will give us rest. Because Jesus has rest. It belongs to him. He will give it to those who come to him. But the only ones who come to him are those who admit that they're weary and need what he has. You know, it's amazing how many refuse to admit their need. Do you know anyone who won't go to the doctor no matter how sick they are? For a service, I had to tell my wife to stop looking at me. Do you know anyone that doesn't know how to fix something, but they won't ask for help? Won't stop and ask for directions no matter how lost or late they are? That's a trap that some men get into. I'm a man. I don't need GPS. It's over there somewhere. I'll just roll down the window and smell my way there. I'm a man. I don't need help fixing the car. I've got a hammer. Well, maybe you can change a tire. Maybe you can program the smart plugs in your home. Maybe you can fill out your taxes. Good on you. But when it comes to life, the fact of the matter is we can't go it alone. Maybe for a while things sail along nicely, but eventually something's going to happen, and all of us are going to realize that we are in over our heads. Every one of us. There isn't an exception here. It doesn't matter how much money you have or how capable you are. You will find yourself at some time in life, maybe more than once, when you realize you do not have what it takes. And the reason that I can say that with all confidence is because God loves us, and he knows we can't make it on our own. That's a deception. He knows we can't make it on our own, so he will put us in a situation so we realize our need and call out to him. Every one of us. No exceptions. Many people try to escape the burden of it all by running to distractions. Entertainment, sports, success in career, romance. But too often the distractions end up adding just more to an already full plate. What starts out as an entertainment becomes an obsession. What starts out as a sport, which is simply just, a hobby, all of a sudden now we're spending hundreds and thousands of dollars on the sport and go into debt so that I can have fun. I'm in debt now. My score is never low enough. Golf. It just becomes one more burden. Jesus knew what he said that day to that crowd would be studied and read by people in later generations. The promise of rest was true for the people of first century Galilee as he looked out on that crowd, and it's no less true for those that he looks out in this room this morning. Come to him, and you will find rest. He says, "Come to me." Jesus doesn't call us to a philosophy, to an ism. This isn't an invitation to an ideology, certainly not to a political party. This isn't a call to a moral program. It's not an invitation to join a religion or a group or a denomination. He says, come to me. He invites us into a relationship with himself. He gives the rest we need. He does. Now, missing in the translation to English here is the urgency in what Jesus says. There's an urgency here. When he says come, it is a command, but it's not a stern command. It's not a harsh command. It's not come here. It's a come. I think of a child that's in the street, and dad's on the sidewalk, and he looks up and he sees a car. And the car is coming, and the child is looking at dad, and come. There's an urgency, you need, come. And the child's oblivious to the danger that's approaching. Well, that's what Jesus says to come. You need me, so come to me. And if we come, he promises rest. He doesn't promise a set of rules and rituals. You know, many assume that becoming a Christian means signing up for a religion, a set of church-approved behaviors and routines. They think it's being religious, and they're not interested in that. But being a Christian does mean a different life, but living it that way does not make one a Christian. Christians think and live the way they do because they found rest in Jesus. Because I'm married, I wear a ring, but wearing a ring doesn't make me married. Because I'm married to my wife, Lynn, I go home to her after work. I don't flirt with other women. I spend time with her, not others, with her. Why? Because I'm married. We do chores together around the house. Why? Because we're husband and wife. That's our house. I tell her I love her, and then I prove it by being attentive to her. I give her gifts. We date. We went out last night for burgers. Hook has really good burgers, by the way, if you didn't know. Sorry. Because I'm her husband and she's my wife, that you see, that's our life together. But doing all those things doesn't make me married. I do them because I am married. Do you catch the difference? I went to an altar and entered into a covenant with Lynn. I became her husband. I now live the life of a husband because that's what I am. A Christian is someone who has come to Christ and entered covenant with him. We live the life that he's given us because that's who we are now. We are his people. We are his bride. It's a relationship. It's not rituals. Are there rituals involved? Yes. Why? Because we're in relationship. It isn't a burden. It's a privilege. It's the very thing that Jesus goes on to say. Look at verse 29. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. Who knows how to live better, you or Jesus? Since he's the author of life, he knows how to live. What does he say? Learn from me. There's this thing very popular right now. It's called life coaches. They're very expensive. And what they will do is they'll tell you, hey, listen, here's how to have a successful life. We don't need a life coach. We have Jesus. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. You know, it seems strange to tell people that you've just promised rest to take a yoke. But remember who said this, Jesus. He's a rabbi. And to be a follower, to be a disciple of a rabbi, was to take the rabbi's yoke. Now, what was that? Well, it was the rabbi's teaching on how to obey the Torah, how to obey the law of God. So every rabbi would go around and he would teach the Bible, and then he would say, now this is how we obey. This is how we show that we are the people of God. And it was called the yoke of the Torah of this rabbi. Jesus doesn't say, come to me, take the yoke of my teaching. What does he say? Take my yoke. It isn't just a teaching we come to, it's a person. A yoke it's a wooden beam that's made by a highly skilled carpenter. And it has to be fitted just perfectly to the ox. You don't go to the yoke store and buy a yoke. A carpenter comes out and looks at your ox, measures your ox, and then makes the yoke for that ox. It's personal to them because it has to fit them perfectly or it's going to ruin the ox. How many of you backpack? Raise your hand if you backpack or you have okay. You know you have to adjust the straps. If you put just a stock backpack on and you try to hike with 60 pounds in it, it's going to destroy you. You're going to end up sore and tired, pulled muscles. It's going to be very unhealthy. You've got to adapt that. Imagine a yoke, a piece of wood on an ox's neck. It's got to be perfect. The wood has to be smoothed. And if it's a 2-oxen yoke, the notch between the 2 oxen has to be the perfect for the size of the ox. If they're too close, they run into each other. If they're too far apart, the yoke gets at an angle. You can imagine what that would do to an ox. And Jesus says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me. Every time a young ox would begin, it would be paired with a veteran ox that had been in the yoke for years. And now the new ox's job is to do one thing, just stay next to the experienced ox. It's the experienced ox that does all the work, pulling all the weight of the plow or the wagon. The other ox's job is just to stay in pace. That's what Jesus says to me and to you. Take my yoke on you. I know what I'm doing. And you're my bride. You are my companion. I know what I'm doing. You just come and just fit in to life together. I'll pull the burdens. Your job is just to stay in step with me. Don't get ahead of me. Don't get behind me. As long as we're going together, everything's going to be fine. Jesus invites us to his yoke. His yoke. Not the expectations of others. Some of you, you're a Christian, but the yoke that you've been laboring under isn't his yoke. It's the yoke of your parents. And they're not even here anymore. They're gone. But they live on in here. And words were spoken to you years ago about the way that you should live and what you should become. And you're still trying to live the life that they told you had to live. Some of you are wearing the world's yoke. This is success. This is the way you should live. And you're in a yoke that has worn you out. It's time to ditch those yokes and to take the yoke of Christ, who loves you and wants you to find rest. It's a good diagnostic for us. If your walk with God is onerous, a joyless burden, it's not what Jesus wants. It might be religion, it might be moralism, but it's not the gospel, it's not the good news. Ditch that yoke. Take his. Again, take my yoke upon you, he says, and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart. Jesus isn't harsh. He's gentle. He's not a drill sergeant barking orders. Drop and give me 20. That's not Jesus. God's not standing, when are you going to get it together? Good grief, you've been walking with Jesus for 3 weeks now and you're not perfect yet? Let's go. That's not God. He's gentle. He's humble. He knows that we could never rise to him, so he's come down to us. Jesus says, look at what he says, I am gentle and lowly in heart. The Apostle Paul unpacks this in Philippians chapter 2 when he says, let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who being in the form of God, did not consider equality with God something to be held on to, but he made himself of no reputation, and he emptied himself. And taking the form of a bondservant, literally a slave, coming in the likeness of men, being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient, even to the point of death, the death of the cross. Our God is humble. He's not harsh. He's gentle. Some years ago, I replaced our old kitchen faucet. It was one of the ones that had two separate handles for hot and cold, and it was getting pretty crunky. I was in Costco, and I saw one of these brand new German, one of those, gotta have that. So I bought it and brought it home. Now I'm a man. I don't need to read instructions. Why would I waste time reading instructions so I can spend that time installing? And installing a kitchen faucet is so much fun. You open up the cabinet, you take all that stuff under there, the sink, you take it out, and then you roll over on your back. Floor's down here, the cabinet's that high. It feels so good. You crawl under there and then reach around the sink, which is against the wall. You have about that much space. And you reach up there. It's a piece of cake. What should have been about a half an hour took 3 hours. Bloody knuckles, soaked. And I finally got it to the point where I thought I'm good and turned it on, no water. So I read the instructions and I had to get under there and undo everything that I had did and redo the whole thing. If I had just read the manufacturer's instructions, it would have been a piece of cake. Jesus is our manufacturer, and these are the manufacturer's instructions. Now, we can go the way of the world and listen to the world and take its yoke and say, oh, life is supposed to be this way, and try to do it without the instructions, and we're just going to end up with bloody knuckles and soaked and exhausted, and realize that we should have been reading this all along. Please hear me, the gospel isn't just fire insurance. Being born again isn't just a ticket to heaven. The eternal life that Jesus saves us for begins the moment we are born again, not after we die. Jesus doesn't just want to get us into heaven. He wants to get us through Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday and the rest of the week. And so he says, come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me.